You're listening to the British Baseball Podcast. For me, let me find my questions. Batter Batters of Baseball was something that I wasn't expecting, because people said to me, you need to watch this documentary. I was like, okay, I like documentaries anyway. I'm not gonna I'm not going to ask questions about it. Someone says I should watch something like a good movie, I don't want to know the plot in case something's given away. So I went into it blind.
That's the best way to watching that movie, because there's a total different story than you thought you were going to hear.
Yeah, and straight away I'm seeing Kurt Russell, and I love Kurt Russell to the point where I'm so happy that he did a Christmas movie, because I'm like to my 3-year-old, you get to watch Kurt Russell movies with me. And I was just like, wow, I had no idea Kurt Russell was involved in baseball. And just as the whole thing unfolded, and I literally, as soon as it finished, I sat there and I was just like, I had those baseball, when people talk about having good baseball feels and baseball vibes, I just wanted to watch it again. I'm even getting goosebumps now thinking about it and talking about it. That's what it did to me. And I was just like, that's such a great story. Everyone loves an underdog, and like a coming out and it's like the baseball Mighty Ducks. It was awesome. Like what do you remember from back then? What was your experiences when it came down to it?
You know, Kurt's nephews, the Way brothers, contacted a few of the Mavs and asked, would it be okay if they pursued a documentary? And I'd said to both the boys, they said, look, I've seen 4 or 5 scripts on the history of the Portland Mavericks, and everyone was rubbish because they made stuff up. I said, if you get in touch with the guys and anybody involved with that team and just let them talk and tell you the truth, there's your story. And I did say the first guy you need to contact is Todd Field. I mean, he was the bat boy who became a writer, director, actor in Hollywood. And Todd is just an awesome guy, lives in Maine now. And that was a great collaboration for them, because Todd really kind of held their hand through a lot of the project on where the script should lie. It was pretty much Todd's suggestion that the film basically be the story. The whole arc of the story was the big league, was the Bing Russell story, and how the rest of us were just members of Bing Russell's band. Yeah. And embraced it. It was just great. One of the coolest things about the film, I went to Sundance in Park City, Utah, where the film premiered, and I'm sitting next to Kurt Russell. And before the curtain goes up, I said to Kurt, is the film any good? And he is so great. He said, Rob, I haven't seen it yet. He said, they interviewed me, they interviewed my mom, and they were on their own. When they finished that movie, they were about almost $60,000 in the hole, excuse me, on their Visa cards.
Really?
The 2 brothers did it on their own. They were cleaning out Kurt's mom's attic, their grandmother's attic. And they saw all these old clippings and photos and so forth. And that's how they put the thing together. But the reason that Battered Bastard worked was because it was the truth. It was Bing Russell, who probably should have had a bigger footprint in Hollywood, because he's a terrific actor and a wonderful guy. And as it turned out, he used to say the biggest decision he ever made was to introduce Kurt to Walt Disney. Kurt became a kid rock star with Disney films and TV productions and so forth. And Kurt always looked after his dad. Whenever Kurt did a film, his dad would be a driver, a doorman or something. He'd always get his father into the movies. In fact, when Kurt did a made-for-TV movie on Elvis Presley, simply called Elvis,
yes,
father of Elvis Presley in that movie is Bing Russell.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
So the family was big league all the way. I had my story was I wasn't good enough to play here. I ended up getting a teaching job and pitching for a local club in Cape Town in South Africa. And my dad had sent me a packet full of sports clips. And one was the Portland Mavericks were having open tryouts. And my dad said, you know, Rob, your post-Cornell days have been pretty good. You may want to go out to Oregon and see what happens out there. And as often was the case, I took my dad's advice. But I feel so charmed and so lucky that things worked out.
Yeah.
It's funny, my son Charlie had said to me recently that had I made the team in the beginning, I wouldn't have had the life that I had, because it was because I was a marginal player that it forced me to come up with new ideas. I didn't pitch that much for the Mavs. I only won one game in 3 years there, but I was embraced by my teammates and the ownership. I started a baseball day camp called the Little Maverick Baseball School, and that's where I met Todd Field. He was 11 or 12 years old, getting baseball lessons from the Maverick players. Bing Russell gave me the opportunity to use his players during the day at a public park, using his brand as the Little Mavs. I mean, I'm maybe 12 days into my visit to Portland, Oregon, and I'm being interviewed by the local newspaper. We've got the first ever baseball day camp. Bing was always at the cutting edge of seeing something that was authentically cool. And he knew that I didn't have any motivation except to be a good coach and somehow be a part of the team. And it just worked out. And Bing was like that. I mean, I'm probably the luckiest Mav. Todd Field and I talk about that all the time. It's Todd and I who probably got the most out of the friendship that we created with the Russell family. But a lot of guys scored in terms of moving on in their life, becoming teachers and entrepreneurs. And Jim Swanson, our left-handed catcher, ran a pub up in Seattle for years called Swanee's. It's like Bing had the golden touch. He had a good sense of who the good people were, and he threw them all together, and there we were. When I met Ozzie Smith in Cooperstown, because lucky for me that my bubblegum became Big League Chews, the Hall of Fame bubblegum. So I get to do clinics up there, and there are guys like Ozzie Smith, Hall of Fame shortstop, who played for Walla Walla in small town Washington against the Mavericks. And when Ozzie Smith found out that I was a Mav, it was like we were kindred spirits. Yeah. I mean, I won one game in 3 years as a minor league pitcher, and I'm shooting the breeze with a Hall of Fame shortstop named Ozzie Smith. And he's talking about how great it was to go up against the big bad Mavs and what a cool collection of guys we were, unshaven, pot-bellied, and just kind of irreverent from day one. And he was just so gracious about how he understood the Maverick mania. He said, I love going into Portland, Civic Stadium, 8,000 people for a single A short season game. He said it felt like the big leagues. I was so flattered that he was impressed with what we were trying to do and what we accomplished.
This might sound a little bit daft, but looking back at it now, do you think that if you'd gone on to be in like the big leagues in the majors, would that have overshadowed what the Mavs would have been for you? Or do you think the Mavs and all that it was is just such a unique and a brilliant thing that you're happy that was like your peak in the States? Because we all know that Enfield Spartans that you played for is the pinnacle of your career. But like in terms of playing, like, are you happy with how it turned out?
You know, when I think of the Mavericks, if I had to put it into a movie, like how would I compare it? The Mavericks were like Casablanca, like a no frills black and white film. And the ending is very much like Casablanca. You know, Bogart doesn't get the girl at the end, and the Mavericks don't win the championship. But in our own way, we came out on top. And even though Bing would argue otherwise, if he were in on this podcast, he would have to agree with me that we had a 5-year run. It was pretty much perfect, and then it was over. I mean, it's hard to say if they ever get Major League Baseball here. If they call it the Mavericks, that would be cool. But you know what we did was unique, and it was fun. And I think the biggest word that comes up to me is that was authentic. The guys were really good guys. I mean, we were from a wide spectrum of guys. You know, we had fellas who rode a motorcycle across the country to try out for the team, and guys with college degrees and advanced degrees, and guys who had families and kids who were accountants who showed up in the late innings to be a relief pitcher. I mean, that's what Dick Rustak did. He had a cup of coffee in the big leagues, ended up being in Portland, and he was one of the Mavs closers. It was just such an odd. We were the misfit toys. There's no question about that. So no matter what happened post Bing Russell Portland Maverick era, nobody would say that it wasn't as cool as it was if we end up getting a big league team. I think what they would say is that the Mavericks kind of started the ball rolling to show the world that Portland, Oregon could support baseball.
Yeah. Who would you say were the biggest personalities that you played with the Mavs?
Obviously, Kurt. Kurt was a rock star. And the cool thing about Kurt, and Jim Bouton too, who was my partner in the Big League Chew bubblegum business. Jim had pitched in the World Series. He'd pitched for the Yankees. He was a broadcaster. He wrote Ball 4, one of the top 100 books according to the New York Public Library for the century. Both Jim Bouton and Kurt Russell were 2 rock stars before they became Portland Mavericks. Interestingly, they were Mavericks before they were Portland Mavericks. I don't know if you know the history of the word Maverick, but it was a rancher in Texas. I think his name might have been Samuel Maverick. He wouldn't brand his steers. So an unbranded steer became known as a Maverick. And so that's where the word comes from. And Bouton and Kurt Russell were Mavericks before they became Portland Mavs. And the cool thing about both those guys in terms of observing is they'd done so much, and yet they were so grateful to be on that bus, to be in that dugout, in the crummy hotels, eating in the diners. They just soaked it all in. And there are a lot of guys who probably didn't have the wealth of experience that Kurt and Jim had, but they learned from them. They said, these guys think this is really cool. And it caused us all to kind of take a deep breath and really savor it even more than we probably would have, because the 2 big deals on the team never made a big deal about themselves. And to me, that was a really big learning lesson. Hanging out with Jim Bouton and Kurt Russell was hanging out with my 2 brothers, Ed and Harry Nelson. Just 2 regular guys just getting on and leading the league in fun in many ways. Yeah. Other players on the team, Cliff Holland was drafted 3 times out of high school, junior college, and then from Southern Cal. Great athlete, and just for whatever reason, never got a break to get to go higher than the Portland Mavericks. Reggie Thomas, of course, is in the film, featured in the film, was just a great base stealer, but a really cool guy. When I think of Reggie, I think of, there used to be a sandwich shop that if you stole a base, you could win a free sandwich. And there were a couple of times where Reggie would hit a double and flip with a hamstring injury around first base, and everybody thought he was hurt, but all he was doing was really running for his supper. He'd steal 2 bases to kind of double his salary, as one of the guys said. But he was just a gracious guy for all his eccentricities. I can remember when we would stop halfway between Boise, Idaho and Portland, Oregon to gas up the bus, and everybody get out and get a sandwich or something. Reggie come back and have a cup of coffee for Jake, the bus driver. And I'm thinking, that's kind of cool. We're all making $300 or $400 a month. Reggie maybe a little bit more, but there was an honest humility about it. Steve Collette was the manager of the last year. Frank Peters gets most of the spin in the film, and Frank was outstanding in his own way. But Collette was just a straightforward guy. He asked me to be the pitching coach, and he told Bing Russell that he'll take the manager's job if Nelly can be the pitching coach and Swanee can be his hitting instructor. And Swanee probably was hitting $111 in his career as a Mav, and I hadn't won a game yet. And Bing said, if that's what you want, Steve, that's what you get. So there was just an honesty about it, and I just can't believe it was that long ago. But it's, I've been a lucky lefty for a very long time.
Yeah. Without turning this into the Kurt Russell Appreciation Podcast, what are your 3 favorite Kurt Russell films?
Well, Escape from New York, of course. There's a pizza joint here in town called Escape from New York, and it's a New York City style pizza joint. And there are photos of Kurt all over the room. Okay. It's pretty cool. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I loved him in Overboard. It's where he met Goldie. Yeah. And of course that struck gold. And the made-for-TV movie that he did called Elvis. No frills, Dick Clark production. Nobody knew that Kurt could act as an adult, and there was a woman, Joyce Selznick was the casting director, and she chose Kurt to be Elvis Presley, and everybody said, this is preposterous. How's that going to happen? There's also the same woman who chose Gary Busey to be Holly in the Buddy Holly story, another unlikely choice that turned out to be spectacular. Yeah. But yeah, I think those 3 for Kurt. I mean, how many used cars? is hilarious.
Yes.
And it's based on a true story in Portland, Oregon. The Tonkin brothers, Marv and Ron Tonkin, apparently didn't like each other very much. And somebody took it and basically made it a farce of the two brothers. And in fact, the Tonkins, if I'm not mistaken, they sued the production of the film and they said parody's fair play. You know, Jack Warden played both brothers. It was just hilarious. But the thing about Kurt, I mean, I just can't get over how real he is. And, you know, the Santa Claus, the Christmas Chronicles.
Yeah.
I mean, how great is that?
Yes.
I mean, he's hilarious. When he starts singing and he does a blues riff, it's the same guy.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you one story. We were in the bus. Everybody checks out because we, again, it's a pit stop. They're gassing up the bus. Guys are grabbing a sandwich. And Bing and Kurt is sleeping in the back of the bus. And the team dog scrambles and climbs all over Kurt before the dog gets out of the bus. And there's nobody in the bus except me. And Kurt doesn't even know that I'm in the bus. And he says to nobody in particular, "What are the odds of that dog stepping on both of my nuts to get out of this bus?" And he goes limping. He can't believe the pain that he's in. And I said to him, I said, "Pretty good line." And he said, "You heard that?" And I said, "Yeah, it's pretty funny. I'm sorry for your pain." But, you know, he was just, it reminded me, like I said, the Enfield Spartans, same kind of guys. Everybody had an appreciation for the game and a good sense of irreverence. And the word that keeps coming from me is gratitude.
Yeah. How did you go then from playing for the Mavericks to Enfield? What was your journey?
You know, it was funny. I got a call from a fellow up in Seattle. He had an over 40-year-old team going down to Florida to play in what was called a Roy Hobbs tournament. And he said, a friend of mine says that you're left-handed and you can still throw strikes even though you're, 40 years old. And I'm putting a team together. And I said, "Sure, I'll go." And I went for, I don't know, a week or 10 days. I had friends down in Florida and I pitched a couple of games. One was pretty good. One was pretty disastrous. But there were some Enfield Spartans on that team. Robbie Lenorio, who was underage, and I don't know why he got a special dispensation, probably because he was British and how good could he be, right? And Oscar Marcelino. And there was the skipper of the team was Gary Thompson, and he did some clinics and things over in the UK. And we just in the pub over a couple of pints of Guinness. I said, "I've got nothing going on next summer. Any chance you need a left-hander?" And one thing led to another. And in May of 1991, the day I landed was the first time I ever heard what the FA Cup was. Gaza was playing for, who was he for? Tottenham, maybe? I don't even remember. It's a game he got hurt in. And it was funny. I said, "Let's get a bucket of chicken. We'll go watch a game." And that's what we did. My first day in Enfield. And we're talking 30 years ago. And I can remember details like that, like what we had for dinner watching the FA Cup. I could give you 1,000 of those. We could do a whole series of these. But it was
I'm not going anywhere. Fill your boots.
What's that?
I said, "I'm not going anywhere. Fill your boots."
It was just pure happenstance. And just the luckiest thing. The fact that Malcolm Needs and I hit it off so well right from the beginning, it was like Back to the Future with Bing Russell and Malcolm and I. And we had a small kids program, Little Spartans. I met young Brad Marcelino. I think he was 9 years old. I mean, it was it was put together with sticky tape, really. I mean, I can remember warming up in my first game. I think we're playing maybe Nottingham Pirates. And Malcolm's got a suit on. We get on the bus and I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. And I'm warming up. There's nobody to warm me up because our roster is not filled out yet. And Brad says, "Yeah, I can warm you up." He's 9 years old. And he's warming me up in the bullpen, 2 left-handers. And I go out in the first inning and I give up a single, a double, and another double. And I remember going behind the mound thinking, you're a little long in the tooth. This might not have been a good idea. And then we turned to double play. One thing led to another. We ended up winning, I think, 5-3. Bedingfield behind the plate. It was awesome. It was beyond anything I expected, because when I went to South Africa in '73, I was 24 years old. And I'd only had one good year as a university pitcher, my last year at Cornell. And I was over the moon with having one good season as a D1 pitcher. And then no chances to play pro ball, didn't get drafted, had 3 weeks at spring training, what they call extended spring training with the St. Louis Cardinals. And that didn't work out. And I was teaching school. That didn't work out. And I overheard two guys at the Someplace Else Tavern in Ithaca, New York, talking about baseball in South Africa. And I ended up going, one thing led to another, and I ended up getting a teaching job and pitching. And both my pitching and my teaching improved such that it kind of launched this itinerant life. My dad used to tell his friends at church that his son was in Africa, big game hunting. And, they said, oh, he's a hunter? No, he's a pitcher, actually. He's just looking for big games to pitch. And from there, it just kept going. I would do winters in Cape Town and then summers with the Mavs. And then, 1980, the bubblegum hit, an idea I had just sitting in the bullpen, observing the Maverick players. I had a lot of time on my hands. When people ask me, how'd you come up with the gum idea? I said, you got to understand, it's kind of boring in the bullpen. It was just, again, happenstance.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions coming later on in the listener questions about Big League Chew.
Sure.
And I want to give a big shout out to Ian and Ash from the Bats, Cap and Sunflower Seeds. I'll leave a link in the show notes to the episode.
Oh,
they
nice.
did a 20-minute episode where they just tried Big League Chew and just talked about the different ones. I'm sure it's Big League Chew. I might want to edit this out or I'm spot on with what I'm saying. But yeah, they did a bubblegum episode and it was brilliant. So yeah, what are some of your fondest memories then of baseball in Britain?
Well, I think from day one, how welcoming the players were, the junior Spartans, the little Spartans, and then the supporters. The fact that we had what, in America we call fans, we had Spartan supporters and people who really, they appreciated the nuances of the game. I love the rivalries we had. When we would go up against the London Warriors, it was like Cornell against Princeton. I mean, it was a big deal. And I think that's one of the luckiest things I can say about my baseball life is that wherever I went to play ball, my teammates and I took the games seriously. Afterwards, all bets are off. You go to the pub, teammates, opponents, umpires, fans, it was a joy. But that was the one thing I really loved about pitching in Great Britain is that those games really mattered. I mean, 30 years ago, when we had the championship series, we had to play in to make the final at an 11 o'clock game. And then we played London Warriors at, 2 o'clock, and then a double hitter the next day. And it was intense and it was really fun. And of course, we were lucky at the end that Robbie Ewell in left field makes a catch and it's over. And the Spartans have won the first championship of the British National League. And we celebrated like it was Game 7 of the World Series. And then 6 days later, we had to go again, I'm not sure where it was, maybe Nottingham again, where we won the Knockout Cup. And I remember the pain in my arm because I threw a lot of innings, 21 innings in the first weekend, and then a complete game the following Saturday to win the Knockout Cup. And, I'm at the time, I'm 42 years old. And it hurt so good. I mean, it really is the kind of ache and pain I have now. And I'll get up in the morning and I'll say, I remember this feeling, except I didn't throw 9 innings yesterday, So that's the one thing I really remember about playing for Enfield. They just gave me a chance to pitch. And that was kind of the big deal, that if I can get a pint after a game on Sunday and I'll coach junior Spartans and I'll hit infield and fly balls to the guys, but you have to give me the ball every Sunday. And I was lucky because of the gum, there were no demands in terms of flights or apartments or stuff like that. I was going over there for the love of the game. And I highly recommend if you're able to ever get to do something you really like to do and you don't have to worry about other stuff, it's really not a bad way to go. But the Enfield guys, every one of them, they were irreverent. it reminds me of, again, I keep going back there. It reminds me of the Mavs or my college teammates. It was just a collection of guys who had one thing in common at the beginning. And then, I'd go to the West End and with some teammates, we'd go see Chekhov, and other times we would go see just a musical comedy or something like that. You would learn about your teammates and their families and stuff. The one good bit of advice I got from my big brother Harry when I started hitting the road was to be loyal to the teams that you go to. So when I went to Cape Town, I always played for Varsity Old Boys, and I played about 6 seasons there in the 70s, the 80s, and even in the early 90s. Same thing with England. When I went back, I was always an Enfield Spartan. And in Sydney, Australia, I pitched for North Shore. There was no, I never put my skill out there to the highest bidder because I didn't have to. And plus, the sense of community that baseball has internationally is something really special. It's really cool. So when I go back in October to celebrate that 30th anniversary of the time that we surprised the London Warriors and surprised ourselves for that matter, it's going to seem like it was 6 months ago, not 30 years, because of the sense of community that we had. And that's my biggest takeaway from the Enfield Spartans is that I've got lifelong friends. Yeah. I mean, still keep in touch with Steve Simmons and Robbie Ewell and Gary Bedingfield and the Lenorios and Malcolm Needs. They're just the greatest friends. And Brad Marcelino, Brad's near 40 years old and down in San Diego and doing great jobs as a premier coach, nationally recognized. The fact that I knew him when he was 9 is pretty cool. We have a special friendship. Yeah, everyone that comes on that knew Brad as a child, you just have the funniest and the best stories to tell about him. He's brilliant. I had him on the show not too long ago. I think it was my first one back in season 2, and he's such a great dude. And I loved every minute of talking to him. And I still chat to him every now and then on send him a couple of messages, see how he's doing. And he's just great, just a genuine chap. He's ace. Yeah. Even when he was a little kid, he was one of the rare kids in a youth program that was far and away the best kid on the field. But he was so generous and kind to the other kids who really couldn't play a lick. He was an amazingly patient kid as a 9 and 10-year-old, but he also got the big picture. He'd be crushing the ball. We'd be doing some kind of scrimmage, a 7-a-side kind of thing. And I would say, all right, Brad, get up right-handed. And because I knew that he had the eye-hand coordination, that he could do that. And I said, when you get up right-handed, you introduce yourself as Yeldar, which of course is Bradley spelled backwards. And he got that immediately, that when he was right-handed, he still signs his emails to me, Yeldar. I mean, I love stuff like that. More important than the big games that you won or the ones that you lost are little dopey stories like that. And I'm going to be in San Diego in less than a month's time, and I'll get to see him, and it's going to be grand. It's always grand with his wife and kids, just the coolest stuff. Yeah, awesome. Was it the Marcelinos that helped you to settle when you came over to England, or were there any other players that helped you to get your feet on the ground? My memory of it is that I think Brad and his mom and dad were in Disney World. And so I stayed at their house for like 3 weeks before they even came back to the UK. So that was my first place. And then Simon Lenorio got me an apartment above a beauty salon in Winchmore Hill. And the pieces just fell in. I think if you don't have high expectations, and I had no expectations except that I just wanted to be treated as one of the guys, and I wanted to get a chance to pitch. And they gave me that. But they not only gave me the support on the field, but off the field, going to the moon underwater and going to Pizza Express and all those dopey things that we would do. It was just great. I don't know if you know that Ian Pont was on the Spartans right at the beginning. Are you familiar with that name? He's a cricketer and a cricket coach. He threw the ball 100 miles an hour, literally 100 miles an hour. They got him on the gun. He tried out with the Phillies in spring training, and he's kind of a renowned coach somewhere in England. We don't keep in touch that often, but I see his name there, And when I go back in October, I'll catch up with Ian. So it's just funny, all the people that you meet along the way, whether it's an Ozzie Smith Hall of Famer or Gary Bedingfield, one of the finest catchers I ever pitched to. It's just magic to me that can happen. When I went to South Africa, it was just amazing how many people, they just picked up on the fact that this is a guy who likes to play.
Yeah.
And lucky for me, I went to places where I got the opportunity to play. And even though we were, the equivalent of a small college team, whether it was the Enfield Spartans or VOB in South Africa or the North Shore Karingai in Australia, we were competitive. And when you mix the fun and the appreciation of the game with the competition, it makes it all worth it. All the road trips, all the flights, it's totally awesome.
Yeah. One of the questions that came in from the listeners, Jason Durr, who's the former president of Baseball Scotland, he's from Seattle originally. He asked as well, what was it like playing baseball in South Africa in the 70s?
Well, it's interesting. When I went over there, it was smack in the middle of the apartheid era. So I was pitching for an all-white team in 1973, and I did that for 3 seasons. I took a team, I worked the deal out with South African baseball, and I brought a team back in 1976, America's bicentennial year, and we called ourselves the American Eagles, and we went through Rhodesia and South Africa, and then 6 pairs of the guys stayed for a year or more. There are a couple of guys who were still there from 1976 to teach baseball and play baseball. So being there during apartheid was a little more than a little strange. When I went back in the early 80s to pitch again for VOB, sport was kind of ahead of the world in terms of the politics, because the team was a mixed team. It was like half black guys, half white guys in the early 80s. And then when I went back in the early 90s, just before Nelson Mandela got elected, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 white guys on the team. But again, going back to the point I'd made earlier about the loyalty of staying with my club, nobody cared what I looked like as a ball player, whether I was young and lean or older and a little chunkier. If I could throw strikes and get people out, that's all they cared about.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the baseball cliche. The only race in baseball is between home and first base. And that's what it was like for me. Certainly was a life-changing experience to be in South Africa before things became better. But I'm grateful to it. I mean, I love the people there. And it's kind of hard to describe. I'll also be going back to South Africa next year just to catch up with friends, because we're not getting any younger, and I miss them. I miss them all.
Yeah.
But I will say this in terms of teammates, when I went there in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, I was always greeted kindly, and people understood that, that I respected the game and I respected them, and they reciprocated. Very lucky.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to mention some names. I want you to tell me what comes to mind about them. Not so much the playing ability, but what kind of people they are. No, you ready? Bing
Sure.
Russell.
Kind, smart, generous. He saw the big picture. But the biggest thing was that he saw good things in people, and he surrounded himself with good people. And I really admired him. The fact that he accomplished so much and yet treated us as equals was fantastic.
Yeah. Kurt Russell.
As humble as they come. I mean, what can I say about Kurt? I'll tell you one story where the Mavericks were kind of bad behaving. So when we were in Bellingham, Washington, we had to stay in a hotel 15 miles from the ballpark because all the other hotels over the years refused to have us. And I hitched into town to have breakfast with Kurt and Dean Hinchliffe. And we're at a diner, and the waitress came over and said, one of the cooks says one of you guys is famous. And Kurt said, we're with the Portland Mavericks baseball team, and I'll have the scrambled eggs and bacon and stuff. He never big leagued any of us. He always treated us like we were just like Kurt Russell. And he had such respect for the game and for his teammates, but also such a joy. He just, so much fun. If we have time, I've got one Kurt Russell story. I hadn't won a game yet. It's August of 1977. And Bing says to me, at the time, I'm the pitching coach and also the 10th man on the roster as a pitcher. And Bing said, you haven't won a game yet. Who knows what's going to happen? Schedule yourself for a game, because we want to see if you can win one before Labor Day, first week in September. So I said, okay. And I looked at the schedule, and we were going from Boise to Walla Walla and then back to Portland. And I knew that we would only be arriving at, say, 5 a.m, and we had a game that night. I said, I'll pitch that game because everybody else is going to be asleep. And so I did. And we got in at about 5 a.m. I slept for 4 or 5 hours, went and got a newspaper and a cup of coffee, and I'm reading in the paper that it's grocery store night. Fred Meyer Grocery Store is giving away 12,000 tickets. The place is going to be jam-packed. And I'm saying, man, they don't want to see me pitch. So I go into the office and I said, is Bing in? And the secretary says, yeah, he's there. And I go in and I said, Bing, I scheduled myself to pitch tonight, but I didn't know it was grocery night. And those fans deserve to see John Dunn or Joe McLaughlin, the guys who had great seasons. I said, I'm really not ready for prime time. I'll put myself in later this week. And Kurt is in the next room and he overhears this and he says, Rob, you can't back down. You can't do this. Go out and pitch, throw 5 innings. Nobody cares one way or the other. You're taking it too seriously. Go have some fun. And that's what we did. I pitched 5 innings. We barely won the game. And Kurt took us to a tavern beyond the ballpark called the Bullpen Tavern. And we partied there till like 4 a.m. like I was Madison Baumgartner and I'd won Game 7 for the Giants in the World Series. Kurt just treated me and the rest of the guys with such reverence. It's funny to say that because he's an irreverent guy, but he understood the people who got it in his life. They meant the world to him. And of course, he meant the world to us.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories about Kurt Russell is that he's also Walt Disney's last words.
That's correct.
Why. Yeah.
Correct. If I remember right,
Russell.
the last thing Walt Disney wrote down on a piece of paper was Kurt Russell.
That was it. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. In my head, I always have it like Rosebud at the end of like with the glass of it. He goes, Rosebud.
That's cool that you know that story. I was talking about
Russell
just recently. That's funny. It really is.
I've got another couple of names to ring off for you as well. I've got Jim Bolton. I know I've pronounced that wrong, but it's accent.
Jim Bouton. What can I say about Jim? When in 1964, I was on a youth league team called Senior Little League, and we ran the table. We won the World Series in Louisville, Kentucky. We beat Mexico and Texas and in front of like 10 or 12,000 people. I was 15 years old. First time I'd ever taken a road trip and taken a plane. And at that year, Jim Bouton was a big deal with the Yankees. So fast forward, I get out of college and nobody is nibbling. Nobody wants to see Rob Nelson on the mound. And I write to Jim Bouton because his baseball life is over. Now he's a sportscaster in New York City. And I wrote to him and I said, I'm working on a knuckleball. I've had no success with the stuff I have now. Would you spend 15 minutes with me to help me throw it? I was in upstate New York going to graduate school near Ithaca, New York. And Jim sent me a note back and he said, call this number and we'll make a time and a place. So we did that. I drove down from Ithaca, New York down to Teaneck, New Jersey, outside of New York City where Jim lived. And the 15 minutes became an hour. And Jim I'm a total stranger. He has no idea who I am. And so this is in the summer of 73. 4 months later, I end up in Cape Town. And I didn't even know I was going to be doing that when I met with Jim. It was just pure happenstance that something happened about a month later. Like I said, I overheard 2 guys in a pub talking about South African baseball. But I didn't know I was doing that when I was working out with Jim. So a 15-minute meeting turns into an hour. He says, good luck, appreciate it. 2 years later, we ended up being teammates with the Portland Mavericks. And I went up to him in the clubhouse when they signed him. And I said, Jim, I don't know if you remember me, but we threw knuckleballs together at a public park in Teaneck, New Jersey. And Jim was great. He said, Rob, as I remember this, I threw knuckleballs and you tried to throw knuckleballs. And I said, yeah, that's exactly right. So we became fast. We spent a lot of time in the bullpen together and shooting the breeze. He's kind of, the only thing that's unusual about Jim Bouton is that he's not left-handed, because he was such an outside the box thinker. But we would ruminate about just wacky stuff. And he's the guy I shared the idea with for Big League Chew Bubblegum. And a lot of people who I'd spoken to about it said, that's a fun idea. Jim Bouton is the only guy who said, Rob, I could sell that idea. So he was a businessman and an athlete and a competitor. So we became partners on Handshake. And it just worked great. He passed away 2 years ago. And I think about him every day. Just an absolute great friend. And again, in that Kurt Russell mold, Jim just had this innate sense of people who got it and who didn't get it. And once you're in his inner circle, he just treated you like a rock star. And I'm grateful for his patience with me, because, my first degree was in philosophy. Second degree was teaching middle school. I'm kind of all over the map. And Jim brought focus to me and deadlines. He used to say that he was a dreamer with a deadline. And that's what I needed. I needed a partner like that. And he became much more than a partner. He became one of my best friends. And I miss him, but he was sure a great guy. And he said he had more fun playing for the Portland Mavericks than he did for the Yankees. He said, let's face it, Rob, it's a more exclusive fraternity. They're only 5 years worth of Mavs. The Yankees are hundreds of years old. And that's a pretty good take on it. But he loved the game, and he really enjoyed not only being with people, but being an advocate for people. I had a line that I used when Jim passed away, Jackie Robinson line, about that life is unimportant except for the impact it has on other lives. And that's Jim Bouton. Jim really looked out for other people. And yet, between the lines, his nickname was the Bulldog. He was intense on the pitcher's mound and equally intense in the boardrooms. And that's why Big League Chew is a success today. It's all because of Jim Bouton.
Lovely. Gary Bedingfield.
What can you say? You meet a guy whose father made a catcher's mask out of coat hangers when Gary was 7 years old. This is a guy who loved baseball. And when Gary and I became friends, when we became a battery, I mean, they always refer to a pitcher and a catcher as battery mates. We really were mates. When we beat the London Warriors in '91, we had to win. Well, we won 3 games out of 4. So over the course of 35 innings, Gary caught every single inning and never complained. And he just was a big picture guy, going to batting practice or just doing anything. My first memory of Gary was when the team had picked me up at Heathrow. We drove over to the ground. They wanted to show me the ground. And there's Gary doing a soft toss drill with Ed Burchell, young Eddie the Great, who's now, 40 something. And he was doing a kids drill at noon on a Saturday. I just knew that I was with the right group of guys. And Bedingfield and I, we just had a connection. He was a pretty good catcher and I was an okay pitcher. But between the two of us, we had good chemistry. There were times that he'd give me a signal that he knew I should shake off. And later on, we talk about it. I'd say, you didn't want me to throw that pitch, did you? He said, no, I just wanted you to shake it off so the batter would think something else was coming. So we had a chemistry that I absolutely treasure. I mean, I ran into him 2 years ago. Brad Marcelino set up a dinner down in San Diego. I didn't know Gary was going to be there. It was so much fun. And it's funny how I use that word time and again, fun. But the Spartans understood that fun mattered. And the straw that stirred the drink with the Enfield Spartans was Gary Bedingfield. Everything starts with the catch, and he was the man. He understood good days, bad days, sunny days, rainy and mud. Every day for Gary Bedingfield was a good day to play ball. Just love that guy.
one of the things Gary put when I put listener questions out, but I last saw Nelly in San Diego in October 2019. It's been locked down almost ever since. Tell him a Spartans reunion is on the agenda for ASAP.
Yeah, that's good to know. I know I'm going to be in London in October because I want to go back to the ground, and to me, it's sacred ground where we ended up surprising everybody, like I said, including ourselves. And Gary made it happen. So I'm glad that there's going to be a Spartan reunion. Got a couple of Cornell teammates who played for the Spartans as well, Robbie Daw and Dave Lewis, and they'll be there as well. We'll just have an American contingent joining the Spartans.
But let's say Malcolm Needs.
Malcolm Needs and I were like Butch and Sundance. It was just so much fun to go out to dinner with Malcolm and just dream. I mean, he wanted to create a league. He designed a ballpark where the press box was going to be a double-decker bus behind home plate. The beauty of Malcolm was that I think of a line Jim Bouton had when one of the guys with the Portland Mavericks said that, Rob, your problem is you think about too many things that don't matter. And Jim Bouton turned to all the guys and said, how do you know? And that was the great thing about Malcolm. Any idea that I would throw up there or that he would do, we would say, yeah, that's interesting. And we would always have fun with it. I created a board game, and he and I would go out to dinner and just play my game over and over and over. He was so patient with me that I said, Malcolm, this is going to be bigger than the bubble gum. The game is going to be bigger than the gum. And he always had faith in me. And that was the cool thing about Malcolm, is that he believed in people. And when he ran the Enfield Spartans, it was, again, it was really the Portland Mavericks of British baseball. He just was such an all-encompassing guy. He knew the theater, he knew sports. He just an amazing guy. And he always laughed at my jokes. And then he would say to me, you're really not that funny. So he always kept my feet on the ground, and I can remember once he'd written a play and I had one joke for the play. And he said, look, I'm the writer, you're the ball player, just forget about it. But there was one night about 4 Spartans and our dates went to see the play. And just before the interval, the joke setup comes up and I'm trying to think, maybe Robbie Ewell, might have been Lenorio next to me. And I said, this is my joke. And it was, and the audience laughed and the curtain went down. And then we went to get a glass of wine during the interval. And there was Malcolm. He had a bottle of champagne. He said, okay, you got your one joke. I'm taking it out. This crowd doesn't know what funny is. He was just always thinking of goofy things to make people happy. I miss the guy. And I'm hoping he's going to be there in October too, because, if Gary was the straw that stirred the drink on the field, in terms of the big picture, Malcolm was the man. And we all knew it. And we all loved him. Great guy. Awesome.
Absolutely. And the last name I'm going to say is Steve Simmons.
Oh man, Steve Simmons, just what a teammate. I just love the guy. It's just he understood how to play the game properly. He's such a good teammate, and just little things that I would do that he would understand when I would back up a base or pick a guy off first base or just bunt a guy over. He understood small baseball, but he also understood that he'd said to me once, he said, your baseball life's been interesting because it seems like you've always gone to teams that would give you the chance to play. And that was the most important thing for you. And I said, that's right. And he said, you always stayed with the same teams. And I said, that's exactly right. And to me, it was an interesting observation that he'd done a little homework of what I'd done before. And he was respectful of it. And I think he took a page out of, the Nelly playbook. This is the way you play baseball. Yeah. And I can't wait to see him. Please let him know I've got a spring for his toss machine in the mail. He sent me a note about a month ago and he said, I can't believe this rubbish you sent me. This little pop-up machine broke down after 30 years. I can't believe it. I want to send it back for a refund. And I said, well, let me just send you the spring and you can carry on. And so the springs are in the mail, Steve. But I will say I love him like a brother. And I'm really looking forward to seeing him.
Yeah, I'm sure I appreciate that one. He also sent in a listener question. He says, is there any truth in the rumor that you had an interesting catcher at high school or college?
His name was Randy Poffo. And Randy never made it in the big leagues. He did, however, become a professional wrestler. And he became Randy Macho Man Savage. And when I would see Macho Man on TV, I couldn't believe that was the guy I was pitching to in Sarasota, Florida. I will say this about Randy Poffo, because his name comes up time and again, because he was a pretty good minor league ball player. They said, hey, Nelly, you pitched to Poffo. What was he like? And I said, when I threw 3 innings in spring training, extended spring training, I got hit like a piñata, and I was really not very good. And Randy would come out to kind of settle me down on the mound, and he would just say the kindest things. Keep the ball down, change speeds a little bit. He was just so gracious when he could have said, man, you need to go get a waiter's job. And he didn't do that. Randy was a really nice guy. I'm happy for his success. I'm sad that he's gone. He died young, but he sure was a good guy when I knew him. He was a really cool guy.
He was like one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. I mean, his match in,
is that right?
in Mania 3 with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is an absolute classic. But again, that's another podcast for another day. That's pretty much all the questions I have for today. But I'll throw these in now with the rest of the listener questions. I've tried to strip feed them in as we go. Jack Ford Lane has some questions. He says, were you aware of just how successful Big League Chew would be?
No, absolutely not. And truth be told, when Wrigley signed our deal, when we signed our deal with Wrigley, it was a 3-year deal. And they thought it would be a fun novelty. And here we are, it's 40 years later that there it is. I remember I did an interesting interview, 5-6 years ago with ESPN. And somebody said, might have been Darren Rovell, when you got your first box of Big League Chew, when they sent you the prototypes and you open the box and you open the pouch, what did it smell like? And without missing a beat, I said, it smelled like fun. And he said, it's fascinating you would say that, because I asked Jim Bouton the same question, and Jim said it smelled. Why we succeeded. Jim was the business angle, and I was the 11-year-old boy who couldn't believe his good luck. So in a word, no, I had no idea that Big League Chew was going to be doing more than pay off my student loans back in 1980. I had no idea. I've got 3 kids now, putting them through university. I'm grateful for the success of Big League Chew.
That's amazing.
It was a fun idea. I think the thing that makes me really happy about Big League Chew is that the whole idea was to come up with a fun stuff guys were stuffing into their mouths, because I'd only tried tobacco once. It never made sense to me. And to come up with a fun substitute that was a little bit edgy, but just, let's face it, shreds of gum. And for some reason in America, it keeps popping up. It's on the Family Guy. It's in this film or that film. It makes me happy that people got the joke. And of course, it makes me happy when I get a royalty check too. But to answer the question, I had no idea it was going to be this much fun, and that it was going to be life-changing.
Awesome. Jack's also asked, what made the Mavericks so unique, other than the independent status? Was there any club ethos that separated them and made them so engaging to certain baseball fans?
That's a really good question. There's the old Richard Dreyfuss movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Classic, where everybody's just drawn to this location because something is going to happen. The Mavericks were like that. People read about it and they said, this looks like it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. So what made the Mavericks different is, okay, we're a little bit older than the other players. We were hungrier because we weren't making that much money. We were playing ball really for the love of the game. And it didn't matter if you had an Ivy League degree or if you're a bus driver, if you were 25 or 45, anybody could try out. And there was something about that commonality. Even the bus that we had, a school bus that Bing painted red, became our badge. You know, Portland had a thing back in the middle 70s that I think began with the Mavericks. And the slogan is keep Portland weird. And we were like right at the cutting edge of that. We were a different kind of team. And my baseball.
Yeah.
It was kind of Bauhaus baseball. Bing Russell didn't have watch the Mavs. You came out and you watched the team play ball as best as they could. And there are a lot of things that just emerged. Joe Garza getting on top of the dugout with his broom when we were about to sweep a team. It was irreverent and it was funny, but it wasn't disrespectful. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people miss the point about the Mavs is we did respect the game and we did respect the opposition. And Ozzie Smith makes a big point of that when I got to speak with him. The fans got that we were out there for the right reasons. And we may not be very good, but we gave it our all. And I love those guys. It was such a diversity geographically, ethnically, it was just such an egalitarian society that anybody could make anybody laugh, whether you were a 10-game winner or Rob Nelson, 1 win in 3 seasons. Nobody seemed to mind. They just knew that we all loved to play the game. And maybe teams have that now, but we sure had it big time. And I'm grateful.
Yeah, brilliant. Back to Jason Durr's questions to follow on from his playing in South Africa. Is what the first flavor of Big League Chew was maple root beer. Would we ever see it made again? And will cherry cola ever make a comeback?
I'm going to say yes on the cherry cola comeback and a definite no on root beer and maple Big League Chew. I didn't know what I was doing. I read on People magazine, a small company in Arlington, Texas was selling a make your own bubblegum kit. So I bought a case of the stuff. And we went to Candy Field's kitchen. Bat Boy Todd Field's mom's name is Candy. And Mrs. Field let us use her kitchen. And it was on February 6th, 1979. As it turns out, it was Babe Ruth's birthday. A total happenstance, just pure coincidence. And I made maple flavored and then root beer flavored Big League Chew because I thought that would be cool. I thought brown bubblegum would be cool. And when we finally sold the deal to Wrigley, they said, you stick to the ideas, we'll stick to the gum. No kid is going to stick brown bubblegum in their mouth. So the answer is no and no in terms of maple and root beer. Cherry cola, one of my favorites. And you will see it within the next, I'm going to say 3 to 5 years. We just came out with a new Slammin' Strawberry last year with a girl on the pouch. And it's absolutely a killer flavor. So we're kind of riding that Slammin' Strawberry wave for a while, but stay tuned in terms of cherry cola.
There you go, Jason, get your orders in. And last question from him is, with loss of revenues from COVID, expansion seems likely as owners could use the injection of cash. Where do you rank Portland's chances of getting a team?
It's a tough question. I'd probably rank it higher than the reality. I think we could support a big league team. I think it's more likely Montreal is going to get a team, and they should. And the way things are going in America now, it wouldn't surprise me if Las Vegas got a team because the NHL has done great. The NFL is there now. Yeah. So there used to be a stigma to be the gambling capital of the world. But I think Major League Baseball doesn't have a problem with that. If I had to guess, those would be the 2 cities. Portland should be in the mix. Nashville should be in the mix. Quite honestly, I'd love to see a team go back to Brooklyn. When baseball had was king. So Brooklyn or even Northern New Jersey, Major League said. But I think number one would say where they filmed The Natural, and 20 minutes from the Big League Chew factory, where Ford Gum makes Big League Chew, is Buffalo, New York. And Buffalo is a pretty cool town. And they've got a minor league park that seats 20,000, and they designed it in such a way that they could seat 35 in no time by putting a second deck in. I'd love to see a team in Buffalo. I don't know if you ever seen, you probably have, The Natural, where Redford hits the home run and all the lights explode and everything. That's Buffalo, New York. The stadium's gone. Yeah. One of my Cornell teammates, Duke McGuire, is on the Knights team. Whenever I see the highlights of the film, I always see Duke looking in amazement when Roy Hobbs hits the ball into the lights. It's a fun memory for me. But one of the reasons I moved the factory to outside of Buffalo, New York is number one, because of the movie The Natural. Number two, I had college teammates who were from that area. And number three, the winningest left-hander, you could say winningest in America. That just doesn't go over well in the UK. But the left-hander with the most wins in the history of baseball is Warren Spahn, who grew up in Buffalo. So I love the baseball connection with the Buffalo area. So I'm going to give them a shout out as well. That means baseball is going to have to go to 36 teams to satisfy what I think it should be. But if I had a choice, I'd say give me Montreal, give me Portland, and it'd be a great rivalry between Portland and Seattle. It'd be great fun.
Yeah, indeed. So now we're in the bottom of the seventh with the last three questions, and your answers mean you're either going to get 3 strikes away from being out, or you're going to get 3 walks to get onto bases loaded as we go into the walk-off. So, Rob Nelson, do you have any hidden talents? Can you hear me?
I make a good batch of popcorn.
Yep.
I'm pretty good at the grill. And I do have my board game that I haven't given up on. I still think that someday you're going to see Rob's game out there. Say, oh, that's the bubblegum guy. So my goal is to become gum guy and game guy. But we'll see what happens there. But I will say my ability to make a pretty good steak on the grill and a good batch of popcorn for my kids, that's about as high as it goes. And I'm not a bad driver. I drive a stick shift, so that's makes me feel old. But it actually makes me feel young.
I'm happy with that one. As someone that loves board games as well, I'm into my tabletop gaming, sorry, nerd alert. But as soon as that game comes out, you let me know when I'll get involved in that.
Okay, send me your address. I'll send you a prototype.
Awesome. So number 2, what are you most afraid of?
Wow. I don't want to wrap the thing up heavily. I'm most afraid that America is not going to be able to unify itself. Our country is in an odd frame of mind, and I want to see us work. It's e pluribus unum is what's on our money, and that means out of many, one. I'd like to see us become more patient and kind to each other and be less polarized. And I fear that that's not happening at a pace quick enough. Okay. And I'll leave it at that. This is a great country. It's offered me some amazing opportunities. My dad used to say, if you invented Big League Chew in Switzerland, you'd be teaching middle school somewhere. But, America is an amazing place. And the diversity here is our strength. We are a nation of immigrants. We were in the beginning and we still are. And I want us to come together.
Cool. And the last one is, do you have any guilty pleasures?
Probably more than I do. And I once read that anybody who has a couple of bottles of nice bubbly in their fridge in anticipation that there's going to be something to celebrate is somebody you want to hang out with. And my fridge has a couple of bottles of bubbly. So I would say that's about it. There's probably plenty of others, but I'll leave it at that, okay?
Okay, no, yeah, I'm happy with that one. So I'm happy now that the bases are loaded. It's time to walk them off. Do you have any final words or any parting advice, any shout outs that you would like to give?
Shout out to Malcolm Needs. Mr. Needs set the table for a fun life for me and a lot of other people. And he and Bing Russell, to me, are two amazingly cool people. And I would like to shout out my Spartan teammates. And I've got to say this, the baseball community in England, whether it was Matt McKinney, the umpire, or the London Warriors, I just love the way they respected the game. And if I could leave with one thing, it's like, never forget what a pleasure and what a privilege it is to be a part of the baseball community, and always respect the game and everything that goes with it. Your teammates, your family for letting you go do it. Just enjoy the game and enjoy your life. And frankly, just enjoy each other. We're only here a short time, and it's worth it. I really appreciate this opportunity. This has been cool.
Oh, Rob, the pleasure has been all mine, and I'm sure the listeners will enjoy every minute of this. I mean, like, I honestly, we couldn't talk for hours, but I've got bath time approaching with a toddler. You could probably hear in the background.
Sure.
So unfortunately, I'll tell you and leave it. But this has been an absolute dream. I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's been so much fun. Rob Nelson, thank you so much for your time. It's been great. Love it. You're a top bloke. I can see why people are so happy to have you come on the show. And I hope everyone's enjoying it.
Thank you so much. We'll see you now. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Rob, that was amazing.
That's awesome, man. Geez, you're good. You're good at this.